The day began on a high note. Suzanne "Susie" Streeter, 19, and her best friend Stacy McCall, 18, had just graduated from Kickapoo High School. It was a time of possibility, with the two friends planning a trip to Branson. Susie was living with her mother, Sherrill Levitt, 47, at their new home on 1717 East Delmar Street. The mother and daughter were described as being very close. That night, after the graduation festivities, Susie and Stacy found themselves with nowhere to crash after their friend Janelle Kirby's house got too crowded. They decided to drive their separate cars back to the Delmar Street house. Sherrill, meanwhile, was at home. She was a dedicated cosmetologist with 250 clients at New Attitudes Hair Salon, and was known to be a woman who would never simply abandon her life. Around 11:15 p.m., she spoke to a friend on the phone, mentioning she was working on a piece of furniture, painting a chest of drawers. This was the last time anyone heard from Sherrill. Sometime between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. on Sunday, June 7th, Susie and Stacy arrived at the house. The police later concluded the women went missing sometime between their arrival at 2:30 a.m. and 8 a.m. What happened in those crucial hours is the ultimate enigma. Sunday, June 7th, 1992. A silence rings alarm bells. When Stacy McCall's friend Janelle Kirby and her boyfriend showed up at the house around noon that Sunday, the scene was unsettlingly calm. They found the front door unlocked, the women's cars all parked outside, and a terrifying silence inside. Susie's car was noticed to be in the semicircle drive instead of the carport, a subtle detail that hinted at an interruption. The only signs of life were the family's Yorkshire Terrier Cinnamon, who was found inside the house agitated, just yipping and crying, and described as the only witness to the disappearance. The house looked as if the women were just about to leave or about to settle in for the day, but then had been abruptly interrupted. The abandoned lives. The most compelling evidence, far beyond the scene details, was what the women had left behind, the items a person would never willingly abandon: money and ID. All three women's purses were found inside the house, lined up on the steps leading down to Susie's bedroom. Sherrill's purse, notably, still contained a cash deposit of almost $900 from her work at the salon. Keys and vehicles, their car keys were left inside. Vices, Sherrill, a known chain smoker, and Susie both left behind their cigarettes and lighters, a sign to those who knew them that they would never have willingly departed. Essential items. Sherrill's eyeglasses were found beside her bed, suggesting she was interrupted while reading. Most critically, Stacy's migraine medication was in her purse. Signs of preparation. Stacy's clothes from the night before were found neatly folded, with her jewelry, rings and watch, tucked inside the pockets. Susie and Stacy had used makeup wipes, suggesting they were preparing for bed or for the day ahead. Lost evidence. Tragically, the first people on the scene unknowingly compromised potential evidence. The only physical sign of disturbance found outside was a broken glass globe covering the porch light, which lay shattered on the front steps. Before police were called, Janelle's boyfriend, trying to be helpful, swept up the broken glass and threw it away, potentially destroying a possible clue. Later that day, there was another critical, devastating loss. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, visited the house and checked the answering machine. Earlier, a friend had allowed the answering machine to pick up a call from an unidentified male who left a strange and disturbing call full of sexual innuendos and crude remarks. Police were later very interested in the recording. However, when Janice listened, the message was inadvertently erased, which was common for voicemails in the 1990s, and the valuable evidence was lost forever. Janice McCall's worry escalated into a frantic alarm, and she made the difficult decision to call the police. At approximately 9 p.m. on June 7, 1992, Officer Rick Bookout arrived at the residence over 16 hours after the women were last seen. The official investigation began the following day. Theories of an invisible crime. The most perplexing question remains: how could 3 women be abducted from a home with no sign of a struggle or forced entry? The most compelling theories focus on overwhelming force, deception, or a fatal surprise. Control through a weapon. The simplest explanation for the clean scene is that the assailant used a gun to subdue the women. As convicted kidnapper and person of interest Robert Craig Cox stated, "It is very easy to control 3 people when somebody comes into the room with a gun. The intimidation would compel cooperation, ensuring a quiet exit and explaining why no furniture was overturned or blood was found." The lack of forced entry strongly suggested the assailant may have been known to Sherrill Levitt or used a deceptive tactic or ruse to gain access. One original investigator theorized the assailants may have lured one of the women out by taking the family's Yorkshire Terrier, Cinnamon, and then knocking on the door pretending to have rescued the dog. Utility worker Robert Craig Cox himself speculated that entry could have been gained by pretending to be a utility worker and knocking at her door early in the morning. It's also plausible that someone convinced one of the women that a loved one was in trouble, forcing them to leave abruptly to help. This would explain why they left critical personal items behind, believing they would be returning shortly. The attack likely occurred between the women's 2:30 a.m. arrival and 8 a.m. The only disturbance was the broken porch light globe. This suggests the assailant broke the light to work under the cover of darkness or eliminate visibility. Sherrill's bed had been slept in, and the television was found on, showing static, indicating a VCR tape had finished playing. The attacker may have been already inside the house when Susie and Stacy returned, or they may have been approached while asleep or half asleep and quickly subdued before they could resist. Despite thousands of tips and an investigation that brought in the FBI, on Tuesday, June 9, 1992, the case remains cold. 2 individuals, however, stand out as persons of interest. Robert Craig Cox is a convicted kidnapper and robber imprisoned in Texas, whose history and statements place him squarely in the narrative. Cox was a convicted kidnapper-robber and was living in Springfield when the women vanished. He initially had an alibi for the morning of June 7, 1992, but his girlfriend recanted this in 1995, stating that Cox had instructed her to lie. In 1996, Cox told a journalist that he just knows that they are dead and claimed their bodies were murdered and buried in or near Springfield and they'll never be found. Cox worked as a utility locator and had also worked at the same car dealership as Stacy McCall's father. He noted that his utility work could have placed him near the Streeter/Levitt home without raising suspicion. It should be noted that law enforcement has never charged Cox, and investigators have stated they do not believe he has any credibility. Gerald Carnahan is a suspected serial offender who was later convicted for the 1985 rape and murder of Jackie Johns, who disappeared only 12 miles from Springfield. Carnahan lived just 5 miles from the Levitt/Streeter home. Crucially, in the months immediately following the June 1992 disappearances, his behavior escalated, including domestic violence and attempted kidnapping of another young woman. Carnahan has been linked to female victims who drove distinctive vehicles with vanity license plates. Suzanne Streeter drove a car with the vanity plate SWEETR. As a well-known local businessman, Carnahan fits the theory that the assailant may have been recognized, preventing a struggle and providing a high motivation to eliminate all 3 witnesses if the girls returned unexpectedly. Beyond the suspects, 2 pieces of unique witness evidence have kept investigators searching. A witness reported seeing a woman matching Suzanne Streeter's description driving an older, dusty, moss-green Dodge panel van between 6:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. on June 7th. The witness heard a forceful male voice from inside the van demanding the driver, "Don't do anything stupid," or "Don't make any silly moves, back up and turn around." Authorities took the tip seriously because the witness noted a birthmark on the driver's cheek, a mark Suzanne Streeter had that she typically concealed with makeup. On December 31, 1992, an anonymous caller phoned the America's Most Wanted hotline, claiming to have information about the abductions. the caller gave specific details that investigators were later able to corroborate, leading them to believe the person had prime knowledge of the abductions. The caller mentioned a motive and hinted at a link to the southeastern United States, specifically the Jacksonville, Florida region. In another tragic blow to the investigation, the call was accidentally disconnected when the operator tried to patch the caller through to Springfield investigators, and the individual never called back. The case of the Springfield 3 remains Springfield's most well-known cold case, a chilling example of a triple disappearance with no confirmed motive, no remains, and minimal crime scene evidence. The hope for resolution now largely rests on the retesting of decades-old evidence. As one former prosecutor noted, the eventual resolution of other complex local cases, like the Jackie Johns murder, which utilized DNA evidence to convict Gerald Carnahan, offers a small glimmer of hope that a future scientific breakthrough may finally provide the answers. Until then, the disappearance of Sherrill Levitt, Suzanne Streeter, and Stacy McCall remains a ghost story of the highest order. 3 lives that vanished without a trace, as if they were never there at all. If you have a mystery you think deserves a second look, or you just want to support the channel, like this video and join the investigation by subscribing. Stay curious, stay aware, and I'll see you on the next episode of Shadowline Mysteries.